Welcome to the Republican Professor. This afternoon, we have an honored guest, retired law enforcement, David McCrery. Thank you, David, for being here.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
David, did I say your first name right? David?
Yes,
Okay.
I go by David. My legal name is John David. I was cursed from birth because my parents named me John, but immediately started calling me by my middle name, which caused all kinds of problems throughout my entire adult life, both as a child, as an adult.
So
That's just the way it is.
You got a double doozy for biblical names. You got John,
Yeah,
David,
yeah.
and then McCreary. Is that a biblical name too? Somewhere in like First Kings?
Doubt it.
King
Very
McCreary.
serious.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's not like a Hittite name or something. Well, thanks for coming on. I think we got connected on social media through your wife, Melissa.
Yes.
And I knew that you were retired law enforcement. I know medically retired, but still 23 years. It's pretty good. And I've been wanting to have law enforcement on, and you also have some ministry experience and a heart for ministry as well. So we'd love to hear all about Mr. David McCreary. So
Sure.
we're happy you're here. And I
Thank
love that
you.
background too, those books and stuff.
Yeah.
So what are you involved with now that you're retired from law enforcement? We'll get to
Well,
your law enforcement here soon.
yeah. 2007, 2008, just a number of different injuries that I had sustained on the job over the years kind of caught up with me. And when you're in that career and when they find that you can't chase 17-year-old kids over fences anymore, eventually they give you your pink slip. And I was not devastated that I had to separate from the career. It was I was around 47, 48 when that happened, and my goal was to leave at 50, because it is for the most part, if you're involved in the enforcement end of law enforcement, it's very much a young man's game. And I hated seeing guys in their mid 50s and trying to push a patrol car around, up to 60 years old, because they're trying to max out their retirement. It's just not the right fit, especially in this day and age, in the environment where I work that was very active. I wanted to leave early and move on to the next half of my life, whatever that would be. That came a little bit early. Unfortunately, it came without a little bit unexpectedly, so I didn't have a plan in place, and it coincided with the beginning of the Great Recession in 2007, 2008. So, we went through some lean years as I was trying to figure out where a guy with my skill set fit in. We eventually left California, came out to Texas. I found a job for a while that was very rewarding, but it was actually the hardest job I've ever had in my life. I was a high school teacher at a private Christian school for 2 years, teaching all the social studies curriculums for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And it was rough. I got it. Fell into my lap the last minute, and the entire first year there, I lived one day ahead of all my students in each class. I would go home with 4 textbooks under my arm.
Wow.
And I would read the next day's lesson one day in advance. And oh my gosh, that was
harder than being a police officer.
That was harder than being a cop. I was unprepared for that, but it was really rewarding though, working with the kids. I got to admit that. I fell into a job.
What town was that in?
That was in a small little central Texas town of Belleville. It was the county seat, and it was a population of about 3,000. Wow. So now I grew up in Kansas, in rural Kansas, in small little towns like that. So for me, it felt like, it was like old home week, it so reminded me of my youth. My poor wife was out here we were on, 5 or 10 acres out in the country, and she was kind of like Ava Gabor on Green Acres. It just wasn't a good fit for her. So we eventually have gravitated. We live in College Station now, which is big college town, Texas A&M, and it's the right mix of smaller city, but with all the amenities. We're happy where we're at now.
That's good.
Yeah, I actually work in the offshore oil industry now. Kind of through the back door. Got a chance to get into that field as a safety advisor. So I work a month out in the Gulf of Mexico on an oil rig, and then I get an extended weekend that lasts 4 weeks long when I get to come home.
Wow. What are your hours like when you're out on the oil rig? And what's your situation? What's your setup?
Yeah, on paper, I work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but I'm the only safety advisor out there. So if anything bad happens during the night, I always get a call and woke up. I'm on call all the time. And, we'll show up on day one and you just work for 28 days. It's 7 days a week, 4 weeks in a row. You don't get a day off. It's just, you just work, eat, and sleep.
Sounds like being deployed when I was in the Navy.
Very much.
Yeah,
Very much
12-hour
like that.
watches. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's interesting.
The rigs are set up very much like a naval ship.
Do you share a room with somebody, or you have a cot somewhere? Where do you get any sleep?
One perk for me, my position is that I have a room to myself. So for you,
must be special.
Yeah, for your background, it's probably more like an officer's billet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Even not even all officers get their own room.
Yeah. So that's a nice perk.
What's your official title? Is it state safety?
Safety advisor. Environmental health and safety, EHS. Basically my job on the rig is to oversee, build relationships with all the people at all the different levels, and not go hit them over the head with the safety manual. Is just have conversations and help through the strength of the relationship, keeping them steered into the straight and narrow in terms of protocols and regulations, paperwork, job safety analysis, permits to work. It's just there's a lot of red tape that goes on out there on oil rigs, especially after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon incident.
Oh yeah.
Then that got magnified even more. So
now, is that a W-2 or are you 1099?
That's the W-2 for me. There are people that do that on contract, but yeah, I'm an employee of the company that I work for.
Oh, that's good, I think. Great. That's a long day. What's your day typically start with? Do you work out? You work out, you have coffee, you have breakfast. How do you get your food?
Yeah, they'll have a galley, very much like being on a ship, and a catering crew, stewards. The food's not bad. You just don't have control over all your choices, but there'll be a decent selection, and the food isn't terrible as it goes out there in the Navy or in other companies in the oil industry. We get a lot of third parties involved. Come onto the rig. They're contracted to do special jobs for the client, and the feedback we typically get is our rig has some of the better food that they have experienced offshore. So I'm thankful for that.
Nice. Are you able to work out? Is there a little area that you can do?
They have a couple of gyms, yes, so we can
I'm trying to imagine what it looks like.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of recreational activities when you're off duty, or when you're off tower, they call it in the oil industry. But there is TVs in the rooms, and they have a little bit of a selection. You get a little bit of local programming, the local networks, and then a few movie channels that they're hit and miss. It just depends on your taste if they have anything that you're interested in on any given night. But
And what the rig is doing, is it actively bringing up oil from the ocean floor?
yeah, that's a good question. The company that I work for is in the well intervention business. So our rigs get contracted by an oil company, Shell, Chevron, BP, any of those majors, but also some of the smaller mom and pops oil companies that nobody's ever heard of before.
Hmm.
And we go over existing wells that have been in production for a number of years. And we do either one of two things: either over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, the quality and quantity of the hydrocarbon product that they're extracting has reduced because of water intrusion, sand intrusion, any number of things that degrade the quality of the oil or the hydrocarbons they're getting, or the well has completely run its course and is done. It's no longer economically feasible to extract anything else out of this particular well. In those cases, we'll do what they call a plug and abandonment, and they'll go in and set several cement plugs. It's not cement like you would find on a sidewalk or a street in town, but it's similar in nature. It goes in kind of viscous and fluid, thick, muddish like, and then hardens. And they have to set those by law. They have to set those at different levels in the well, and then cap the top, remove the well head from the ocean floor, and leave when the well is actually put to bed permanently. We're supposed to leave the floor as close to what it was like before the well was dug in the first place. So we'll do plug and abandonments. But the other things that we'll do on active wells is they will open up the well, match pressure, and then they'll run in with all kinds of various different tools in the equivalent of like a plumber's job. We are a subsea plumber. We go in, we clear pipes, we clean out plugs. They may go in and perforate at a different level at the well, because some of these wells, we can operate in 10,000 feet of water. So the wellhead is over, getting close to 2 miles below the surface of the water. And then sometimes the well itself will be dug 3, 5, 6 miles down into the earth. It's amazing that with the technology that they can do, way over my head. So they operate at really extreme depths, which means there's a lot of pressure. So when you open up the well, you got to match pressure from the top coming down so that you don't have a blowout, so that the well doesn't just everything come up to the top. And then they'll send tools down in there and do different kinds. Sometimes they'll do acid washing. Sometimes they'll literally with roto-rooter like things that just clear out stuff. They'll remove sand and sediment.
Your rig, what's the depth of the water for your rig?
So that's going to vary depending on, because we move from well to well.
I see.
We'll be on a well. We'll be on one well for.
Is it the same rig that moves? You move the rig around?
Yeah, our rig is actually a boat. It's a ship. From the outside, it's square. It looks like a platform that you would think was connected to the seafloor, but it sits on 2 big, huge pontoons under the surface with 8 thrusters, propellers that are, the size of your ceiling. And they all rotate to keep us stable when we're latched up, or move all, in parallel direction to push us through the water when we're in transit.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
I didn't know they dug so far deep below the surface.
It's mind-boggling. It's
So you're
crazy.
talking about 7 miles down from
You
where
know, I mean,
you're at.
don't quote me on it because it's not my area of expertise, but sometimes the well head can be, as you know, the surface of the ocean floor is well over a mile below the surface. And then the well itself is dug multiple miles deep. So it's, yeah,
Have you
it's
ever, have they ever dug so far down and then a guy from China came up?
not to my knowledge,
Whoa,
but it's crazy what they did.
bring some oil with you.
Yeah, the technology
Wow, that's
is really
crazy.
mind-boggling.
That's amazing. Um, I don't even know what to ask. It sounds like a kind of a lot to know. How did you get all that training to know all that stuff?
Yeah, I came into it through the back door after those first 2 years in Texas when I was teaching school. Um, a friend of mine, a family friend that moved out here from California with us, he had a background in kind of an environmental safety, and he got tied up with a job helping with the BP oil spill cleanup that went on for years after that incident. So he actually moved, he had to move into Louisiana. His role in that was to clean out these ships that came in that were trying to recover oil off the surface of the water. And they would store them in these big, huge tanks, and those tanks would have to be cleaned out before they sent the ship back out. And he was involved in that process and did that for about a year until that whole cleanup effort started to wane down. And he needed to get, and he was living full time out there. His wife and family were out here with us, and it was time for them to get reunited. He needed to come home. And we found him a job because of his experience in safety and in environmental stuff, working for a training company that really kind of services the industrial world in general, but has a lot of focus in the oil business, either onshore or offshore. A lot of the safety classes that are required are taught there. And he worked there for about a year, and he came to me one day and said, "Man, you should come work for, with me at this place. They would hire you in a minute." In my law enforcement career, I was involved with a lot of training. I was a police academy instructor. I did a lot of training in-house, did training at the regional level on a lot of different subject matter. So I was used to being in front of an audience and presenting material. And he said, "They'd hire you in a minute." And I kept telling him, "I don't know anything about the oil industry. I don't know anything about, industrial safety." And they said, "They'll teach you everything you need to know. They just
Oh,
need
that's
somebody
a good deal.
who can operate this PowerPoint and speak
Oh,
intelligently to a crowd and administer a test."
so in other
So
words, master the material and then say it back exactly correctly. No
yes,
messes up, no messing up, but in a way where they can understand you, and it's on them to master it on their end. And then
yeah,
you examine them
yeah, yeah. So
and try not to offend anybody
that's
with
sometimes hard.
dumb jokes. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's sometimes hard. I've inadvertently offended a few, but it just kind of goes with the territory. Anyway, I
Mhm.
started working for this company. I became their lead BOSIET instructor, and that's an acronym that stands for Basic Offshore Safety and Induction Training. It's a 3-day course.
Can you give
That
me the acronym again? What is it?
BOSIET. Let me
BO.
see. Let me have BOSIET. Offshore Safety, or an induction training. I think I
Okay.
may be messing it up slightly, but
Okay.
there's an organization called OPIDO, which started in the North Sea, that after one of their big oil rig disasters back in the 1980s. 160 plus men on one oil rig all died in a big explosion fire. And
That's a lot of people.
it's a lot of people. It was a lot. And this particular training course it tries to do two things, accomplish two things, is prepare someone for what offshore oil, what offshore life is going to be like, kind of the do's and don'ts, what to expect, how to function effectively in this environment. And they gave you the helicopter emergency training that it's required, because most everybody gets out to a rig via helicopter shuttle. And
Wow.
you have to go through this training that will help you egress out of the helicopter if it crashes in the water and then inverts and the cabin fills with water. They do this in the military all the time with pilots.
I had to go through that training.
Yes. So you're four-pointed, strapped into a seat. You got a window right here, an aisle, people all around, and you're going to hit helicopter being so top heavy, it doesn't matter. Eventually, either right away or shortly thereafter, especially if there's any kind of sea state going on, the helicopter is going to capsize and the interior compartment's going to flood with water. And you have to be able to eject your emergency exit, which is your window, release your seatbelt, keep yourself grounded, because if you free float,
you're upside down.
You're upside down, and if you're
upside down
floating in the cabin,
you got to swim down.
You're pretty screwed.
You got to swim where your legs are.
Work your way to the windowsill, pull yourself out, and then you got to remember that up is actually down.
That's right.
So
the first two times I did that Dunker, I think we called it the Dunker at NAS Pensacola, Naval Air Station Pensacola. I went through air crewman camp. I was an air crewman in the Navy, and I failed. I think I was like the last guy that had to do it the third time. It was kind of embarrassing. I was like, everybody was watching me. It's this huge pool, and everybody's on the side of the pool watching me.
Yes.
And I'm like in a flight suit, you're in a flight suit, and which also sucks because your boots fill up with water. Yeah, it's a little disorienting, and the water goes in your nose.
Oh yeah.
It's just.
Oh yeah.
It's and I kept thinking, okay, my feet are where up is. My feet are where up is. So go toward that. Finally, I figured it out.
Yeah. So anyway.
Did you go through that? Where'd you go through that training?
Yeah, they taught me in-house. I had to go through as a student first, and then I mentored under their lead instructor for about 3 months, and then he left and I took over as lead instructor.
Where was that located at? Is that in Texas?
That was in Texas, yeah. That was in it was a little mom and pop's training company that was based out of Louisiana, but they got bought out by a huge Norwegian safety company called Falck Services, or Falck Safety Services. Falck has now been bought out by another Norwegian training company, and they're now rely on new tech. I think they're just shuffling tax money around, but with all these buyouts. But we would have to do the helicopter survival, and we had a mock helicopter, and we would dunk it in the water, flip it upside down. We'd have two
in a big pool, right?
In a big pool, big
tank.
pool. Yeah. Yep. And we'd have two scuba divers in the water, two instructors inside the simulator, and each of us was responsible for two people. And our job was just to make sure they got out. And the funny thing about this, I would tell this story all the time, and it's true. It's not an exaggeration. I got in more knockdown, drag out fights inside that helicopter with people who panicked underwater than I ever did working a walking beat as a cop. Except the difference is I'm in a confined space, holding my breath underwater and having a fight. Because as you well know, everybody knows when you think you're going to drown and you panic, it's like no holes barred. It was one of the funnest jobs I've ever had. I loved it.
Did you wear fins and like a snorkel mask, or
No, I
what were
just
you
had a
wearing?
mask, no snorkel, just a mask, and we just wore the little water shoes because now our
Yeah.
divers had fins.
Yeah, I was gonna
They
say
were all set up like
the fins
divers.
would get in the way.
Yeah, fins would get in the way for us inside the simulator. But the thing you got to remember is
This thing is like 3 stories deep too, this pool, right? It's a huge tank.
yeah, ours wasn't that deep because it wasn't necessary, but it was way deeper than your average, backyard swimming pool. I forget off the top of my head, might have been 20 feet deep at the deepest end. I'm not sure. But the thing you got to remember is it was not a prerequisite to go through this class as a student knowing how to swim. So all the
Oh my
time
gosh.
we
Oh
would
wow.
have we would have candidates, students who did not know how to swim,
Oh
and
my gosh.
they all
And you're
got
talking
a
all
we
different
would have
ages too, right?
all different ages, all different fitness levels, you
Yeah.
name it. So it was challenging at times. We'd put the non-swimmers in red helmet. They had to wear the equivalent of a bicycle helmet to, just protect their heads from hitting the uh, hard metal objects and so forth, but would put them in red helmets, and they got extra special attention from the divers. When they came out the window, the diver would be there and just come up underneath them and grab them and take them over to the side of the pool where they got a hold on the edge.
Hmm.
So
Man.
so I did that. We did war survival, where we'd put people in the pool and teach them how to use improvised flotation devices, teach them how to use their coveralls as a exit, take off their coveralls,
Wow.
turn them into a flotation device. Yeah.
That's you basically did Navy training, because that's exactly what
Navy
we
guys
did.
do that. Yeah. Yeah.
We had to take their pants off in the water and,
Yeah.
do that whole thing. Yeah. We
Yeah.
had to get rescued by a helicopter as well from the water. That's that,
So,
but in the Navy, it's like all mostly men. There was a few women. It was at least back in my day. And then they're pretty much all the same age in their 20s. I was a teenager, but I guess I was 20 when I went through that school. And so I can't imagine that kind of diversity in terms of age and fitness level, and whether you can even swim going through that training. I can't even
yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Wow.
It,
Amazing.
it was different. It was good. So being in that environment, and I
Cool.
that every week I would teach one of those classes, which took up 3 of my 5-day work week, and the other 2,
Wow.
I'd teach classes on confined space entry or H2S or fall protection, all these basic safety training courses that apply to all the folks working on an oil rig. I became an instructor of.
Okay.
And so
Now, how far away from your home is this? Are you traveling really far? Because Texas is a big place,
yeah,
you know?
initially I was traveling about 30-35 minutes to this particular school.
Oh,
Later in
that's
my
not bad.
career as an instructor, before I started going offshore, I had an opportunity to teach major emergency management, but that was out of Houston, and that was an amazing class, but I was driving an hour and a half one way, an hour and 15 minutes one way. And that was hard. That was probably not sustainable over the long term, but I did it for just shy of a year, and gave me another great experience, another
Yeah.
feather in my cap when I started trying to actually get employed by a company to go
Yeah.
offshore. I was fascinated by their work schedule, their days off schedule. I work 6 months out of the year, and I get a year's worth of salary, and I have 6 months off. When I come home from being offshore, the average American gets a weekend, 2 days, maybe 3 days. When I get
Right.
a weekend, it lasts 27 days. And I was fascinated by that schedule. That's what drew me there. Plus, the money was much better than what the instructors were getting back on
Uh,
land.
yeah.
And And we were still trying to recover from, those lean years
Yeah.
right after I retired.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense why you'd want to do that job. Um, you're giving up those weekends, of course, when you're out at sea, but when you get back, you have, yeah, I think the math, I can understand why the math would work for your time
Mhm.
off. So you're saying 27
Yeah.
days is enough time to kind of recover and cook your hamburgers and
Well, on paper, you think, well, it's a balance. In reality, you miss a lot. Pick a holiday, pick an anniversary, pick a birthday, and you have a 50-50 chance
yeah,
from one year to the next whether you're going to be home.
yeah.
And now that I've got kids that are, grown, I only have one left in the house. He's 18. All my kids are grown. Now we got kids getting married, and now
How
it's
many
like,
kids
well,
is that? How many kids do you have?
3.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and it, it's okay for a while, but you make a lot of sacrifices, doing this. And I've been doing it for 7-8 years now, and I'm kind of at the point where uh, I'm kind of looking for an exit strategy that would allow me to come home.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's a long time to do that schedule. So you're doing when you're home, you have some kind of ministry, you have a heart for ministry that goes back years to even when you were a police officer.
Hmm.
Tell us about that. You were telling me about the books, taking books
Yeah.
everywhere when you were studying.
Yeah. Well, I was a preacher's kid, growing up in Kansas. So I've always been around the church. Moved to California about high school age. Was there until I was a couple years after I was retired from the police department. But as I was in my early 40s, I started thinking, I really don't want to get stuck doing this job, in this law enforcement job, till I'm 60. I'd like to leave at 50. That's when you can legally start drawing on your retirement. And my idea was, I'd like to be able to leave at 50 and start, a second career. But I have no idea in what. I need to go back to school. I need to prepare and get a plan. And I just was really drawn to I was really drawn to seminary, to like New Testament studies or theology. I just had a fascination of learning more.
So you
Um,
grew up as a Christian? You
yeah,
were, I mean, in terms of your beliefs?
yes.
Okay.
Now, by my own
Your
admission,
your
I
dad
have
must have
known,
not done too bad of a job then.
well, by my own admission, interestingly enough, growing up as a preacher's kid, you see all the dark side of the church. You see all the negatives, and it didn't drive me away from church, but it.
Can you give me an example of that? You obviously don't mean that the lights are turned off at when you go
Yeah,
home and that's dark. What do you mean by
yeah.
dark?
Um, so for me, my childhood years, I was robbed of a relationship with my dad because my dad was married to the church. We were in small towns, and moved all the time. The domination that he worked for, you'd be a pastor of a church. If you were a new seminary graduate, they might start you off at a big church where you were an associate pastor, give you a little mentoring, but then eventually they would plant you in your own church where you were the man and there was just you. There was
What
no.
can you give me a sense of what tradition this is within the church? Is it
My dad was a Methodist minister.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so the Methodist Church, and I don't know that they do this now, but back then, they you didn't plant a guy at one church and he spent his career there. They moved him all the time. They would move the pastor from one church to another, move them up to a bigger church, a bigger town. And I was this deathly shy little kid who couldn't get any time with my dad to go play ball or anything because he was doing everything for these little small churches. If they had anything outside of, the Sunday service in terms of groups or organizations or programs, he was the guy doing it. And so that was a negative.
Did your dad never take a Sabbath?
No.
That's kind of a basic thing. Not a criticism of your father. I see it a lot, is that people don't take the Sabbath seriously, the people that are preaching the Bible. It's just weird.
Yeah.
There's don't murder. There's don't commit adultery. Of course, a lot of people don't take that one seriously either. Stealing. But then you have this command to rest. Isn't that command, I think, is one of the most profound things in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the ones where, okay, honor your father and mother. I got that. Okay. I remember as a kid thinking, I wish there was a command for them, for me, but I'm supposed to honor my father. But take a break. Like, you're commanded to do that. And I just see, I can hear the pain in your voice. Is your dad still alive?
No, both my parents passed on within the last 5-6 years.
Do you try to take a Sabbath for yourself?
Yes. No, I can't. When the month that I'm
Yeah.
offshore, it's
Yep.
It's
Same
every
in the
day.
Navy. Yeah, same in the Navy.
But when I come home, my wife and I, and she's doing much better because her involvement in her social media group and the leadership development stuff that she's got for women and the courses and everything, that she's got a really built out program, was very consuming. And she caught herself really kind of being like I was when we maybe hadn't got to this point yet, but when I started taking seminary class, overwhelmed with just the volume of reading. And I was still working full time. I was very active in the church that we were going to at the time, doing a lot of the Sunday preaching they asked me to do. And at first it was like, yeah, no problem, because I'd be taking this really cool class on the book of Mark, or this other really cool class on, Church and God's Mission. And I would just take stuff that I was learning in class and turn around and just give them the Reader's Digest version. It was easy to come up with material to speak on because I was in a seminary class. So, but in order to stay up with the book work, it's like I had a book with me 24/7. And if I had even 5 minutes of spare time, my nose was buried in a book trying to stay on top of the volumes of material that you had to read and then write papers and,
That's awesome.
And it really, I literally subjugated a huge amount of my responsibility as a husband and a father during that period of time, 3 or 4 years that I was taking just one, maybe 2 classes at a time. And
was this online that you were taking them, or were you
no,
showing up to a class?
This was in a classroom setting. It was a local seminary in Fresno.
Okay, Fresno.
Yeah, that's where I did my law enforcement work, Fresno, California.
What agency were you with in Fresno?
Fresno Police Department.
Okay. I've heard of that.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had a seminary that was this a Methodist context still, or?
Actually, it was the only seminary in town. It was the only game in town, and that's why I went there. And they were a Mennonite seminary.
No kidding.
So Mennonites, who are professed pacifists, And
Uh,
here I was in law enforcement.
bringing
And
your gun to class.
in fact, yeah, well, at one of the periods of time when I was going to school there, I had changed my assignment and I was in the traffic division. I was a motor cop riding around on a motorcycle. And I would pull in, there were 2 semesters I would pull in on my motorcycle. I got clearance by my commander to log off for an hour and a half at a time, so that I could go to class, and then I'd log back on and I'd just work an hour and a half over my shift so that I still had the same requisite hours that I put in, because the motor unit didn't answer calls for service. They were completely proactive, going out, writing tickets and towing cars. That was our job.
Wow.
So I'd pull into seminary on my motor in all my police leather, pull up, park my bike, go in, and in one of the lounge areas in the student area, they had some lockers, and I got permission to stow my stuff in a locker and locked it up. And I'd take off, the big leather jacket, and I'd take off the gun belt, and I'd secure all that, and then I'd go to class for an hour, and then go get dressed and go back to work.
Wow.
It was quite funny, and I think I was quite the talk of the seminary for a time. The cop that's taking classes over here, and people
That
would.
wasn't normal for them to have
No,
cops like
no,
that.
and there was a professor or two that had discussions, in his classes. Now, there were not classes that I was involved in, but the word got back to me that things would come up regarding, not Mennonites are very, very much into nonviolence across the board. Some, in all cases, no matter what the set of circumstances is, I would not use force against another person. I would not take another life. I could not do that. And those discussions, I think, kind of elevated a little bit during that period of time when I was showing up as the resident cop that's going to school there.
That's fascinating. Do
Yeah,
you feel
it
like you
was.
got it? You feel like you got a good education there?
I enjoyed it a lot. And all the professors that I worked with were they were great.
What classes did you take?
Well, there was some things like interpersonal communication, church history, that were just prerequisites for any master's degree. The courses that I really gravitated to were in the New Testament era. A survey of the book of Mark was one of the courses by a guy that did his PhD thesis on Mark, and had authored a commentary on Mark. So crazy knowledgeable, just super, learned a ton.
I bet.
Had a course on the book of John that I just loved. Had a course on, the Church and God's Mission. I started a course on Greek, on Koine Greek. And I learned that my brain doesn't work with foreign languages very good. That was very challenging.
Yeah, that's tough. It requires a lot of focus. I took my baby Greek. They call it first year Greek is baby Greek. I took that over the summer when I was in seminary. My first master's is in New Testament, biblical studies, New Testament.
Yeah.
I had to have a major and a minor. My major was New Testament. My minor was Old Testament. There's only 2 options. You either major in Old Testament, you minor in New Testament, or you do it the other way around. But
Right.
I picked New Testament, and so I had to do more Greek. And but I was able to have a summer where I did baby Greek, and that's all I did for that summer was prepare for my 3 classes a week. I believe it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if I'm not correct. I think it was the first thing in the morning. It was the butt crack of dawn. It seemed like it was. It was probably like 7:30 or something like that. But I just remember I had to be ready to rock and roll, and it was tough. it was a tough
Yeah.
summer, but it's good training. Good for you for wanting more training. Tell me, when you're a police officer at this point, what's going on in your mind and your soul that is leading you to get more training? Is it questions that you have about the faith? Is it stuff you're reading in the Bible and you're like, what the heck is that all about? Or is it conversations you're having with your fellow officers, people at church?
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting question. Um, I just knew that I had, in a lot of ways, squandered my relationship with God over a period of time. Law enforcement is a hard gig, and it affects people in a lot of ways. There's a lot of trauma that you take on that you don't realize that you're taking on. I went through a divorce that just wrecked me midway through my career, and there's about a 2-year period of my life that is just a blur because I was so depressed, and it wasn't as much over the failure of the marriage as what I saw. I saw my kids suffering. I had 2 children from that previous marriage, and they were getting drugged through the mud on the other side and included in things that they had no business being included in, and I was just powerless to protect them. And I left with I came through that with a lot of guilt, but
Yeah.
and a lot of wounds. And it actually
Mhm.
it actually occurred right in the middle. There was about a 5 or 6 year period in my law enforcement career that, only now looking back, do I recognize the intensity level of the stress of the job assignments. Um, One of them started out, I was a crime scene investigator for the homicide unit. So my job was to do this meticulous, detailed investigation of the status of the crime scene, including the dead body, including the wound patterns, and the brain splattered across the wall, or the disemboweled organs spilled out over the floor. And I would spend hours upon hours with dead people who died hideous, violent deaths, gruesome stuff that people were not meant to see, let alone be experienced as a victim, let alone ever supposed to perpetrate against another human being. Just really just evil. And it's been hours in that environment, and because we wouldn't release the body to the coroner until the crime scene investigation was completed. So I did that for like 3 years, and then I was already a member of our SWAT team, and violent crime in the city of Fresno got so out of control in the mid 90s, early 90s. And kind of two things really kind of tipped the scales and caused our chief to do something pretty radical. Um, there were areas in town where, if a lone patrol car drove into the wrong neighborhood, like a gang turf area, that patrol car would just start taking sniper fire. The gang members were trying to make a statement: you don't own this area, we do. You're not welcome, get out. And I literally have 3 friends whose cars were riddled with bullets, rounds passing through the passenger compartment and just missing them by the grace of God, kind of a thing. And at the same time that was happening, the drive-by shootings and the gang wars that were going on over turf and narcotic sales and so forth, innocent children were getting, bystanders were getting caught up in the crossfire. And a couple of high-profile events where a straight A student, was killed in her bedroom doing her chemistry homework by a stray 223 round that came through the wall of the house and hit her in the head. And another 5-year-old kid walking home from school, kindergartner, with a backpack on, hit in the back, quadriplegic for life, And in the midst of all of that, the chief activated our SWAT team time, put us on the street, threw together a unit called the Violent Crime Suppression Unit. It was made up of the SWAT team and all the gang detectives. And he put us on the street wearing our G.I. Joe costumes, full tactical gear, and automatic weapons, and said, take control of the streets back. I don't want to bury an officer, and I don't want to go to a funeral of another kid that has been caught in the crossfire. And he gave us 2 marching orders. One was, accomplish this without breaking any laws. Don't go rogue, do everything legal, but right to the limit of the law. And department policy, that's optional. Like all law enforcement agencies, especially in California, had very restrictive pursuit policies. Pursuits represent a highly inherently dangerous situation for the general public, high-speed pursuits. And because of that, we were virtually never allowed to engage in those. Somebody took off and ran one red light or one stop sign, we were ordered to cut it off in order to protect the public. But that sent a message loud and clear to all the criminal elements in town. If the cops are on you, and you got dope in the car, or you got drugs in the car, or you're wanted for a felony, all you got to do is run one red light and they'll let you go. And for years and years and years of that policy being in effect, the criminal element in town knew that, advantage of that. And he said, you guys aren't cutting off any pursuits.
So you're saying that the criminals were paying attention to enforcement patterns?
Absolutely. They're not dumb. They're stupid, but they're not dumb. It's the difference. So
that's the first time I've ever heard of that. They're stupid, but they're not dumb.
Yeah. So he told us, he just flat out told us, you get in a pursuit, I want you to end the pursuit as fast as possible, but don't let them go. If you have to ram them off the road, ram them off the road. And that's what we did. We totaled more police cars in 3 years, and I can't shake a stick at. We had it was as close as I've ever seen law enforcement come to what you see in the movies.
Can you just take a guess? How many cars do you think you totaled?
Oh, I would say easily a dozen, maybe.
Wow, that's a lot.
And
you were with that unit for 3 years?
Yes. Yeah. And we got and as you can expect, because we were so aggressive, we got into a lot of officer involved shootings. And so it was very controversial.
How many people were in this unit?
So 30 plus.
Okay.
Probably.
How many people are on at one time?
Half of that. Now some days there'd be all of us, because our days would overlap. We set it up so that there would be a team on 7 days a week.
Wow.
And so
I was going to ask
weekends,
you what your hours were. What were your hours?
We worked kind of a swing shift, maybe 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Though those hours were subject to change if they identified some criminal trends that they wanted to go address.
Gotcha. And is this 5 days a week that you're doing this 4 to 2? Or is this 7 days a week and then you take a longer weekend? Or
no, it was either, that's a great question. I can't remember. I think it was 4 days. I think we were all working 410s at that stage in my career. So I think it was 4 days a week with 3 days off.
Oh, that is 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, does that include a meal in there? Are you
No,
clocking out for your
we
meal?
would eat on the go. We would usually go as a team. We'd identify it. Well, yes, it included a meal. Would usually identify a time, the commander or supervisor that was in charge that day would decide on a certain time. Yay, why don't we take, 30 minutes for a lunch break? And he'd just tell everybody, go get a meal, meet back at headquarters. We would all eat together. So everybody was done at the same time. And then we'd get back on the street because we worked like a wolf pack. We didn't send cars all out over the city. We would flood an area with all of us. And if one guy made a traffic stop, 5 other units would pull up and form a perimeter around that traffic stop. It was very much kind of military tactics, which is in part why it was so controversial.
I have to ask,
Mhm.
you mentioned the 223 round. That, for those who don't know firearms, that's the same round as an M16. It's the same round as a, what do you call a AR-15, or a Mini 14 for that matter, or a bolt action 223.
Mhm.
5.56 is a very similar round. What do you think about gun control?
I'm a staunch Second Amendment advocate. Uh, I,
Because
I,
that's person's first thought is, oh my gosh, they're shooting. That's a military grade weapon. We should make sure we have gun control. They don't put it at light gun control anymore. That's an 80s term.
yeah,
They would say, the rhetoric, gun safety laws. Now that's the new gun violence prevention, or gun safety, I think it's called. But you've seen a lot of gun violence,
mhm.
so what's your take about the knee-jerk reaction that a lot of people have to have so-called gun safety laws?
Um,
I'm assuming that that you have a view about this, and I'm almost certain I'm correct, even though I just met you today.
yeah, yeah. I think passing laws, trying to legislate our way into reducing the number of guns on the street is not the way to go, because the only people that will abide by those laws are the law enforcement, the law abiding citizens, not the criminal element. And we are never going to rid the criminal element in our country of the access of guns. There are too many. There's just too many out there. They're too easy to get a hold of, and they don't buy guns through the legal channels. They don't go get a background check. They don't go to the local gun store to purchase their firearms. It's black market, it's under the table. And all of the laws in the world that we put out there are not keeping guns out of the hands of the criminal element. Law enforcement, you can look at all kinds of different statistics on what their response time is to critical incidents. They're going to get, if there's like, someone doing violence with a firearm, the cops are going to get there when it's over. If you want to protect the people from gun violence, you need to put more guns in the hands of citizens who are well trained and understand the laws and are, because they're going to be the ones that have an opportunity to intervene. Rarely is it going to be the officers, because they get there after everything is over most of the time.
As you know, from 3 years on crime scene unit investigation with the homicide division. Wow, you've seen a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah,
You've had a lot of time to think about
yeah,
what works to prevent this as much as possible without infringing on individual liberty. I think a lot of people in this gun control so-called debate, and that sometimes I don't even think it's a debate. I think it's just people saying slogans. But and our side does it too, sometimes with the slogans. But we allegedly both sides want to are bothered by murder, which I get a clear perception from you that you are deeply against murder and you would like to prevent as much of it as possible.
Absolutely.
But you,
As everybody, as should be everyone.
yeah. So that's the way you're coming from it. You're not like one of these guys that just, uh, one of these tactical guys that doesn't think very deeply about things. Maybe he's never even seen a dead body,
Yeah.
but you've seen stuff. Um, what's your sense for the other officers that you worked with, their views on it? Do you guys ever talk about that? Gun
Yeah.
control?
Yeah. No, I
I
don't
mean, I know that
know.
you don't speak for them, but
Right. Yeah. I don't I don't know anybody that I worked with that I was peers with in law enforcement that are strong advocates for the kind of gun control legislation that people are trying to pass. They understand that what the way that the gun control lobby, the things that they are trying to do, all the officers that I know of are completely convinced is going to have no impact on making their job easier and reducing violent crime or reducing gun crime.
hmm,
It's going to make it harder for everyday citizens to protect themselves. The law enforcement officers, we don't have to do that because by law, we can carry a gun anywhere we want. But they have empathy and sympathy for the law-abiding citizens out there who want to protect themselves and their families and know that all of these control measures that are trying to be that they have and are trying to continue to ram down our throats aren't going to make the people safer.
makes a lot of sense. So your view is not like an outlier. It's not like oh, that's David. Yeah, David, NRA guy. Your view
That's
is
been,
pretty
yeah,
common.
my experience. I would say that is people in law enforcement.
That matches my experience as well. Obviously, I've not been in law enforcement, but it matches the people I know and the people I have known for a long time. Um, thanks for sharing that. Um, so you're a proponent of concealed carry for people
Yes,
want to get
yeah,
trained?
yeah. I actually when I moved to Texas, I had an option when we first moved to put on my retired ID card for, that says I'm a police officer, retired in good standing, et cetera. I had an option of putting a CCW endorsement on that. And at the time, I opted not to because what I thought it was going to require was for me to go back once a year from Texas to California to go to my old agency to run through one qualification course in order once a year to show competency. And I just said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go back there once a year to shoot a qualification course. And so instead, when I came out to Texas, I knew because of that ID card that most officers out here, if they pulled me over on a traffic stop or something like that, and I told them, hey, I've got a gun in the car, which is legal in Texas, not in California, but legal in Texas, I would still tell them that as a courtesy, which would open up for conversation. I'm a retired law enforcement officer, and I could show them that ID card, even though it didn't say that I had a CCW endorsement on it. Most of these cops are not going to treat me. They're going to treat me as if, they're going to understand that I'm carrying a gun, and they're going to be fine with it. But I also know that you can't, I would tell people, when, they'd talk to me about, what do you do when you get pulled over by a police officer? And I go, well, here's a couple of do's and don'ts. But the one thing you got to realize is getting pulled over by a cop is kind of like Forrest Gump's box of chocolate. You never
Yeah.
know what you're going to get until the officer shows up at your window.
Yeah.
Some officers are super cool. Some officers are super friendly. They're conversive. They care about you. Even if they're writing a ticket, they're wanting it to be as pleasant a conversation, a contact as possible. Other officers get tainted. They you know, ooh, and they're jerks, and they can be assholes. I know. I worked with some. And it's unfortunate, but uh,
Yeah.
the
You
job
meant
can change people.
you mentioned going through a divorce and you had a couple years where you were having a real hard time. Do you think that you might have been an officer like that at one point?
Um, no, for whatever reason, the way that both the job and the divorce affected me was different. It wasn't, you didn't see it on the outside. And my contacts with, you know, people on the job, I never remember a time when I got kind of like that with just contacts on the job. I still looked at people as, I want to connect with them. I want them to understand. I want to be professional.
Mhm.
Where all of this, all the stress of all this of the job plus the divorce, what it did to me is and I didn't learn this until recently. It caused me some of these memories that had some of these high impact critical incident stress related memories that, a psychologist might consider like a trauma wound, wound up getting your brain actually has physical locations where it stores memories. Neuroscience has identified this, and memories from our past are supposed to get stored, filed, if I'm remembering this correctly, in the prefrontal cortex. A whole bunch of my memories from really that really compact 5 or 6 years where I was just under a lot. I was just experiencing a lot from the homicide unit, the divorce, the violent crime suppression unit. I left that and was a child abuse detective. That was hideous. That was like the icing on the cake. And a lot of those memories wound up incorrectly being stored in my limbic system. So when they got triggered by a current event that should not trigger them, it would throw me into kind of like fight or flight syndrome. That's what the limbic system does, right?
Yep.
And
That's right.
where it affected me is in my personal relationships when I felt challenged, or I would either, where there was rocks in the road, particularly in my marriage, I would either respond by aggressively moving forward or withdrawing in retreat. And that's no way to develop intimacy in a marriage. It kind of defeats the purpose. It goes against the grain.
Yeah.
And I discovered this, and I got onto a road where I'm actually now actively, as we speak, doing some things to address this. And there's a way to, as I'm sure you're probably aware, to change some of the neural pathways in our brain, some of the way that our brain processes things. And there's actually a way to move those memories back into the prefrontal cortex where they're supposed to be, so I don't get kind of triggered in this way and have difficulties with relationships, whether it's my wife, my kids, coworkers, whatever.
Yep.
I used to go back.
What kind of stuff are you going through for that,
Um,
or have gone through?
Yeah, no, I'm currently going through EMDR sessions, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I don't know how long this has been around. I think it's kind of relatively new, but it's a way. I've been through two of these sessions. I have another one tomorrow before I go offshore.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of it.
So you're just now, is this
I
brand
am,
new for you?
oh yeah, this is right now as we speak. I am working on reprocessing some of the way my brain works that got screwed up from, I mean, this was 30 years ago now. Some of this
Ho-
stuff was 30 years ago where some of
Yeah,
these neural pathways got formed and some of
right.
these memories got, stored
Yep.
in the wrong spot. And it took me a visit back to Fresno about 4 or 5 years ago. And we had a SWAT team reunion while I was there. About 30 guys showed up. Some guys that I
Wow.
hadn't worked with, hadn't seen in maybe 15 years or so. Guys that I had deep amount of respect for, solid men, good, moral, upstanding character, some of them strong believers. And over this evening, as I was working the room and being able to catch up with individuals and have a 15 or 20-minute conversation, what's going on in your life, and what have you been doing? I saw this reoccurring pattern time after time after time. These guys' personal life and sometimes their professional life was falling apart. Multiple affairs, divorced, lost total custody of the kids, can't see their children, substance abuse problems, 3 DUIs, suspension from the department, got promoted into positions of rank and then ran into authority problems, demoted. Some guys with pretty debilitating health problems, heart issues that they couldn't do certain jobs anymore and were on the verge of being retired from it. And halfway through the night, I pulled together 2 of my closest buddies from those days, kind of my inner circle guys. And I said, what in the hell is going on? I'm talking to these guys and all this, and they looked at me and they said, don't you know, it was VCSU, that unit that we did for 3 years, it screwed us all up. We're all messed up from those days. And it was just the stress, a variant of PTSD.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't across the board. It wasn't
absolutely.
100%,
Sure.
but a significant number of guys, their lives were in shambles. And I remember going home from that evening and talking to my wife, and I told her this story. And I said, the thing that's really messing with me right now is, why did that not happen to me? What was different? How was I shielded from all of that? And she looked at me and raised her eyebrows and laughed out loud. And she says, you got to be kidding me. Think about the hell that we have lived through the last 10 years. Think about how many times we were on the verge of divorce. It's only by the grace of God that we're still together. And I had my first aha moment. And I stepped back and I looked and I said, you're right. It just affected me in a different way. And in the primary area that it attacked was our marriage and our relationship, how we relate to each other, my inability to relate to you appropriately. Wow. Now, I will admit, I was still blinded and still in a state of denial, because in my mind, I thought, thank God I'm over that. Thank God I've gotten through it. I'm on the other side. I've gotten enough healing and I've gotten closer with the Holy Spirit, and but yeah, it sure affected us in the first half of our marriage. I was blinded to the fact that it was still going on, or I didn't want to look deep enough inside me to be honest with myself. And it wound up coming up again this last year. And she just told me, she said, she had one of those brave conversations with your spouse where she said, one of the things that hurts me the most with all the stuff that we've been through is it came to your attention how all this junk from your past is affecting you and causing issues in our life. and you have refused to address it. You won't press into it. So I had my second aha moment, and I went, yeah.
It's hard to know how to press into it, though. It's hard to know what's that next step you got to do? Like
It is hard. It is hard.
because it's
So
not obvious. It's not
it's not
obvious, like,
obvious.
okay, that's just normal life for you. That's just how
It
things
felt
are.
normal. It felt
Sure.
normal to me. I
Yeah,
thought I
yeah,
was
absolutely.
responding appropriately.
That's just your life.
Yeah.
But so how do you figure out what that next step is to address it, to make it healthier?
You just go on a quest, and it's a trial and error. I mean, I've been through a lot of inner healing sessions, the kind of stuff that the church, sozos that they offer, or prayer ministries, things like that. And all of them, I would say I got some benefit out of, but none of them addressed that deepest, darkest root. And we're able to look under the root that was look under the rock that was at the bottom of the pile. Every single one of them I benefited from, and I wouldn't shy people away from those kind of experiences. They're good. Men need to do a lot better job admitting that we have had wounds over the course of our life that are impeding us even now, and we need to
Yep.
be man enough to go try and address them. But you just go on a trial and error basis.
Yeah.
You try something and you see what life is like on the other side of it. If there's still some issues, you try something else. What I discovered after this, my second aha moment, is when we started looking for a practitioner who dealt
Yeah.
specifically with trauma, post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we found a guy in town in College Station. That's his entire practice. And I was so excited. And I went, yes. And I pull up his website, and in big bold letters across the top, not accepting new clients. And I went, oh, no, it can't be.
Oh
And I
no.
just heard this voice in my head said, no, you need to call him anyway. Just call him.
Yeah.
So the first time I called him, you get a voicemail, you're leaving a message for an answering service. And I just said, here's my name, here's my number. I'm really interested in doing some work with you. I believe I got some trauma issues from in my past that is affecting my present. Please call me. We can talk about scheduling. It was very generic. And I waited around a couple hours, and I couldn't get it. It just felt like there's this I'm being told, you need to call him back, and you need to tell him your story. You need to tell him more about why. So I went, okay. So I called him back a second time, and I said, hey, I'm the guy that left that first message, but I just feel like I need to maybe tell you a little bit more what's going on. And I told him about law enforcement. I told him about the homicide unit, the violent crime suppression unit, officer involved shootings, blah, blah, blah. I told him about the divorce that came right in the middle of it. Then the child abuse detective, which was hideous. And I go, I've got a lot of friends that got really messed up from that. And I've been in denial that it messed me up. And I'm at the point in my life now where I'm ready to look under the deepest rock. That's why I want to work with you. And that guy called me back within the hour. And he said, look, I'm booked out 8 months in advance. I have no openings, but I heard your story, and you and I need to talk. We need to work together. I'm going to find a way to get you in. Any crack I have in my schedule, any cancellation, if I have to come in early or if I have to stay late, we're going to do some work together. So he's a Christian counselor to boot. So,
That's awesome.
I mean, even better,
I'm able
connection
to
point.
I'm able to appreciate this as a military veteran. I've been through EMDR myself.
Oh yeah.
And so I know exactly. I'm interested. Did you have any kind of reaction after your first one in your body?
I felt a little.
Did you have weird dreams or anything?
My dreams have increased. Yes, I'm noticing I'm remembering more of them. We dream all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You normally wake up and don't have any conscious memory of the dream, of the multiple dreams that I had the night before.
So
I'm
you have vivid
remembering more.
dreams? You're having vivid
They're more
dreams?
vivid.
Yeah.
And
That means it's working.
and yeah, and I've noticed some of that there's even, you know, we're
Do you feel
still in the middle
sensitive
of it.
after? Yeah. Do you feel sensitive after it for a while? I mean, everybody has a different reaction, but
I don't know that sensitive is a word that I would use. I felt
Mhm.
drained.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and because
Yeah.
if my sessions were anything like yours, they don't just hit the big trauma events that really kind
No,
of, they
no.
go all the
Yeah.
way.
That's right. That's right.
I've gotten in, and we started at memories that I have like at 4 years old.
Oh, yes. That's right.
And
That's right.
that
Yeah.
that
You're
disconnect
getting
between
into it. Yeah. That's
that
right.
disconnect between me and my dad during his
Yeah.
pastor years,
That's right.
and I'm longing for him to be able to go out and play ball with me, but
Yeah.
he was studying for, you know, his, or is analyzing his last sermon, or, you know, getting ready for
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
next, you know, group meeting, or, you know, whatever. That was ones. And he actually this guy does a lot of work with military units, but,
Yeah.
you know, and he'd say, you know,
I went to a military veteran specialist.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even the guys, you know, that, let's say, you know, maybe were in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan or something, the trigger event that kind of identified that they needed some extra help may have been a, you know, a really rough mission. But when they come into the EMDR session, everything
It
winds
always
up being
goes.
related
That's
to
right.
nearly all the time to those formative childhood years
Sure.
between, you know, 3 and 12. That's
That's
where
right.
the first crack in your psyche was formed. And
Yeah.
then all these other trauma events that happened through your adolescent years, your young adult years, your middle adult years, and now you're on combat missions, they keep pounding at that crack until it breaks open.
I'm on this podcast next week. I'm having a trauma specialist on. And what I like about the person I'm having on is the way she defines trauma. And I think a lot of men could really benefit from this. That trauma, a lot of men think that, and women too, I would think, but a lot of men think that you have to go through something like what you went through, or you have to be sent to a combat unit in Afghanistan or something like that, or go through some really horrible um, shipwreck or car accident or something. It could be any number of things. It's about how you process stress, and
Yes.
that's all like who you are from the time you're a kid, how you're able to deal with what's coming up, and what tools and resources you were given as a child, and also how you are as an individual, how God created you.
Mhm.
And some we all do it differently. We all process things differently, and I think it's really cool that you found somebody
Mhm.
like that, this guy, and somebody that knows what they're talking about. You trust this guy
So far, I'm
so
very
far?
impressed. So far, very impressed.
Yeah. So, and it's really cool. I mean, that's a great model for guys. But you also just the thought that you don't have to be um have some kind of crazy background like you have.
And I think that's
You
the,
you might have trauma
yes,
from something, from a relationship or a job
yes,
that you got fired from, or you lost, like in the recession, or you lost a house.
yeah.
There's all sorts of losses. The economy could be, church conflict, it could be relationship, could be kids. So I think that's really, David, that's really cool that you're going through that.
I think you're right when you said, I think what's really important is it doesn't take somebody like me who had a very active law enforcement career, somebody like you that was in the military, doesn't take those kind of extreme circumstances
Yeah.
for a man to be impacted by the knocks that come against him in life, because we all get them to some degree when we're a kid. Everybody's got some issues, and we get we get knocks, there's hard.
That's right.
Life is hard.
Yes.
And it may be harder for the typical, let's say, male that came out of a military background or a law enforcement background, when you have this hyper sense of feeling like I've got to be the tough guy, I've got to be able to handle it and push through. All through my law enforcement, every time I was in an officer involved shooting, we had counseling. Every time after a really, really bad homicide scene, my supervisor, the law enforcement is aware of the stress that this job puts on you. And they would come to me, peer counselors would come time and time again. And are you okay? Do we need to talk? Do you need to see anybody? And
was that helpful when they did that?
well,
When they say, are you okay?
No, it wasn't, because I wasn't willing to accept it. It was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And it was maintaining this persona of being the alpha male. I can handle it.
I hate that question. I hate that question. Are you okay?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're actively like in an emergency and it's like, we have 5 seconds and we got to keep moving. Are you okay? That makes sense. Okay. But like after something stressful, are you okay? I don't know. I mean, I might just be nitpicking, and I am highly critical, but I just feel like, I feel like, what do you expect me to say? I'm going to say, yeah, it's not a conversation starter. I don't think. I think a better way would be something like, I think you've been through a lot of stress, and I'm here if you want to talk about it. I'm interested in listening and hearing about it, and just ask good questions.
Yeah.
Are you okay is not a good question.
No, and we have to, ultimately in the law enforcement profession, maybe also in the military, we need to change the organizational culture when it comes to our understanding of maintaining our own mental health. And it needs to not be optional. We need to get more training in it. We need to have our eyes open to what is happening to us, even though we don't realize it's happening to us. And then we're going to go talk. We're going to go, it's not an option. Do you want to go talk? We're going to go talk. Because, I stopped counting at 10, the number of police officers that I used to personally work with who've committed suicide. At 10, it got too depressing. I don't know if there's been more, but I stopped keeping a tally when I reached double digits. And it's the same in the military. People coming back from, we've been involved in this war on terror now for however many years that we're just now kind of backing away from. And we've got a generation of men, who came back. A statistically significant percentage of them are going to be jacked up to some degree, and they don't know it or aren't willing to look at it. I didn't know it. And then when I got signs of it, I still wasn't willing to look at it, because I don't want, it's just ingrained in us to not show weakness, to not admit that we need help. We can handle it ourselves. I can get through this. This is unintentionally what gets communicated to people in my old career, your old career, all the time.
I would say, as stressful as my military service was at times, sometimes it was incredibly peaceful. Some of the most peaceful times I remember were in the military. I have good memories of the military for the most part. Some incredibly stressful times, some incredibly hard times, but my trauma that I initially went to EMDR for was 15 years on the Democrat controlled college campuses in Los Angeles, where I was I would say there were times of those years where it was actually harder than being in the military.
I don't doubt it at all. I don't doubt
Ex-
it at all.
yeah, explaining that to um, my therapist, what was really kind of what opened my eyes to that I'm actually pushing down a lot that, and I'm not talking about a lot because I think that I shouldn't have the trauma reaction I have from it,
Mhm.
but the way I experienced it, and I've learned I am a sensitive guy. I'm highly sensitive, especially when it comes to stuff I really care about, which education is a key thing for me. When I see these kids and how I got a pretty nice big picture of education in LA because I taught on a number of campuses over several years. So I was able to see community colleges, big state universities. I taught at 2 Cal States. I taught at 4 Christian colleges, and some of those for over a decade, Pepperdine and Loyola Marymount. I taught in gang areas. I taught in Malibu, rich areas. I got the whole gamut, and my whole, I, I was higher education is destroying the country. It's
Oh yeah.
destroying the entire country.
Oh yeah.
That's what was doing me in. That's what was killing me, my soul. And the fact that people couldn't see it. I mean, you can see it immediately when I say it. You immediately know. But a lot of people when I describe it, they don't know what I'm talking about. And that was another layer of the trauma, which is how do I even say what I'm talking about? It's like I can't even articulate it. It's so
I'm,
hideous and evil
yeah.
and dark.
I'm assuming that you are aware of, and I would assume you are probably a fan of Jordan Peterson.
I I've heard of him.
Okay. Well, he says the same exact thing
Yeah.
about about higher education, and he
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
former college professor.
Yeah. And a therapist
Yes.
and a psychologist too. So
He's,
he's a
and
practitioner too.
yeah, yeah. But he has the same exact point of view.
Yeah, it's since you're a Christian, I'm gonna say it this is sometimes I didn't even care if you're a Christian, they'll say it this way. I think it's demonic, actually. And I think that there's a dark presence on the college campuses, which is explains a lot of what I see across the whole country.
Yeah.
But because the college campuses have deep problems that are going unaddressed. And well, anyway, I don't want to turn this interview about me, but that's kind of some
No,
of my
it's fascinating, and it's all relative. Everything is connected, and you know, that demonic presence, and you know, I would say that the two of us are probably, our theology on this is at least in the same ballpark, that you know, the enemy ultimately has been defeated. There is an enemy out there.
right.
He's personal, and but he has been defeated. He's kind of been neutered, but he hasn't been. You know, it's the difference between D-Day and VE Day. We're in the in-between times. He's still roaming around, prowling, but his only weapon is getting us to come into agreement with his lies, right? Is getting us to believe. His battleground is in here. It's not The Exorcist, you know, Linda Blair elevating from her bed, her head spinning around, puking green vomit. The major battleground in every individual is this, and we're losing that battleground in a huge segment of our society. They've been duped into a belief system, an ideology that is the source of it, probably on the demonic scale.
Yeah. So do you believe that demons are real?
Sure.
So a lot of people are listening to this are like, whoa,
Yeah. You know, I mean,
whoa.
now, can I do I
Well,
have
how
a
do you explain
absolute.
North Korea? How do you explain the Soviet Union? There are places that are on there's entire regions for decades that are just completely dark. At least you could a lot of people, a lot of my students, they just deny that exists.
Yeah, no.
North Korea is probably not as bad as we think. Oh, Cuba. Well, what was before that? That was worse. You know, there's always some kind of excuse for these crazy regimes that show up. Well, when I see signs of that in my own country, and I realize, it's actually the exception. America is the exception in the world,
Yeah. I
protecting
think
people.
there is a lot um, to Paul's writings about principalities and powers. There are
Yeah,
spiritual
that's right.
forces.
That's right.
There are spiritual
That's what I was getting
forces
at.
that form over the systems and institutions of this world, and yes, in this country. And then a combination, they get stronger, I believe, as the culture, as the organizational culture within that system or institution is deteriorating and getting farther and farther away from kind of the kingdom or kingdom principles. That power gains power, that spiritual force. The new age people, there's a ton of new age stuff out there, and they would use terms like spiritual forces or spiritual entities. Okay, yeah, the Bible calls it something different: principalities and powers, Satan and demonic hordes, whatever. We're all speaking about, most of the time, similar things. We're just calling them something different, and we have a different understanding of their origin or their purpose or how they work. But there are real spiritual forces, and the education system in the United States has a spiritual force, power, principality, whatever you want to call it, that has an influence, has a governing influence on it. Individual schools, you can micro niche that down. The institution as a whole, higher education might have, uh, you know, but that you go all the way down to individual schools. There can be a spiritual entity
Yeah.
over there. The same with
Yeah. It's
churches,
interesting.
the same with denominations, the
I was
same
going
with
to say
government.
churches. Yeah.
The entertainment industry has a very
Yeah.
real
Big
spiritual
time.
power,
Big time.
spiritual force. And
What about when you were a police officer in Fresno? There were some areas of that city that were under control or influence of that were clearly different. Wouldn't you say that's true?
oh yeah, very
What
much.
what's your theory about that while you were doing the law enforcement? Did you feel like there was a kind of a dark spiritual presence in some areas that was
Um, I
how do you understand the um criminality as it pertains to that? And I don't mean criminality like somebody's got a magazine that holds 11 rounds and not 10, and that guy's otherwise a law enforcing citizen. I mean the kind of immoral horror crap that you were seeing.
yeah,
That's what I mean by criminality. I mean really bad,
yeah,
like
right.
really bad.
Yeah. At the time, I'll be honest with you. I wish my life had been different. I wish I could go back and kind of redo. Don't we all sometimes wish we could change some things about our past? At the
Yep.
time that I was working in those really depressed areas where violent crime was just really out of control, um, it wasn't the period of time in my life when I had the strongest walk with the Lord. You know, I have had my history with my relationship with God has been very up and very down. There have been times that I've walked away, times that I have come back, like the prodigal son. Oh, my life is falling apart. I need you now. I look back at my life and I go, what an immature believer that I was.
But
But
as you look back on those areas, as you look back
now I look back on those areas and I think
how would you do it differently? I'm interested.
I would be very more in tune with um, my understanding of what we've just been talking about: spiritual forces, spiritual presence that are over some of these depressed areas in town. And I would feel like I was walking in with a completely different level, in the in the violent crime suppression, completely different level of protection. In the violent crime suppression era of my career, when we went into some of these areas where a lone patrol car would get sniped, we would go in force, set up defensive perimeters and in second tier perimeters, and and in our own power, in our own physical power, control. I would go in now feeling like I had, what is it? Is it in Ezekiel where the dude's like, oh my gosh, the enemy out there is so massive, we can't, we don't have enough. And it was it Ezekiel that said, now look up, and just the chariots and angels, and just the spiritual forces of light that you walk in. When you understand, some of these deeper things, you understand that you kind of walk in with the kingdom. You walk in with a spiritual power that's superior to that exists in that realm, and that you can, at least temporarily, take control or dominance.
Now you still have your gun, right?
I would always have my gun. However, I do know one guy, and this is a true story from.
I was like, how much did these Mennonites get to you?
Yeah, no, there was a time when I was in it was in that era. There was a street evangelist in Fresno that rode a horse, and he went out at night. He lived up in the foothills somewhere, and he had several different horses. He would trailer them down, and he would get out, and he had affixed on his saddle and he had these LED blinking lights, and he would walk his horse around the streets of Fresno, and
into the rough areas too.
He would go into all of these areas. He was kind of like this cowboy street evangelist. He would just go in and just talk to people.
He wasn't armed?
No, not armed. And he had a story that he told one time. He was off of his horse. He was in a park, and he was confronted by two guys that were clearly, under the influence of some kind of narcotic, and they were going to kill. And I don't remember if it was a knife or a firearm, but they showed every intention of just wanting to kill him right there. And he just dropped to his knees and extended his hand as he started praying. And these guys just dropped their stuff, ran. This guy walked in with a level of presence and even security or protection and I would talk to him and I would say, you are better protected than I am when I go in with 15 SWAT guys into the same neighborhood. Now, God bless him. And I would love to have his faith and walk in his, ability of manifestation of the power. I still wouldn't do it without a gun. It's too ingrained in me.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, and some of these gangbangers, if you're weird, you can get away with a lot. Yeah. And you're the horse guy with the lights.
Yeah.
You're not going to interfere with what we're doing in here.
Yeah.
But
he's not a,
he obviously was protected, obviously, spiritually. Yeah. So that's interesting. That's fascinating. Gosh. Did you ever talk to him?
Yes, I had several conversations with him.
What was his name? Do you remember his name?
I do not remember his name, and I don't know if he's still alive. I would have to make some phone calls. He was actually one of the crime scenes that I did when I was working in the homicide unit was a shooting that occurred in a drive-through lane behind some pizza parlor or some fast food place. And there was a center block wall, and on the south side of the center block wall, a couple carloads of one gang were parked, and on the other side of the cinder block wall, about 3 or 4 rival gang members snuck up, popped up over the wall, and shot about 6 or 7 people. I don't remember how many of them died or how many of them survived, but they shot. It was like a shooting of 6 or 7 or 8 victims. But there was all kinds of rounds that were going in the southerly direction, and right before this happened, this guy was walking, walking by on the big major street south, with his horse. He was there a minute before it happened. And I knew who this guy was at the time. And so when I got there and was doing part of the investigation, somebody told me, horse dude walking by. So I spent half the night, tracking down where the horse dude was to see if he was a, viable witness that had seen anything that was, beneficial to the investigation.
I hesitate to ask, but I feel like I have to, about the child crime unit you were with.
Mhm.
Do you feel like sharing anything from that?
It was just hideous. It was the ugliest thing that I mean, granted, on the homicide unit, I saw hideous, violent, torturous deaths. But most of the vast majority of time, they were adults whose lifetime of decisions led them to be there at that moment. And literally, I mean, they had some degree of culpability and responsibility for what happened. Now, that does not mean and will never mean that they deserved it. No one does. But they lived a life making choices that it was hard. Let me put it this way. It was easy for me not to look at them and see a 100% innocent victim. They played a role based on a lifetime of choices that led them to be in that situation that led to their death. Didn't deserve it.
Are you talking about the children that were the
No.
victims?
These are the adults at the homicide scenes.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, the hugest change when I was in the child abuse unit, every single one of these kids were innocent victims.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, that not in a million years, had anything to do with the things that were perpetrated against them in terms of responsibility, culpability. They were the true, just the truest definition of an innocent victim are children. And
how long were you with that unit?
I was like 2 years with that unit, and I went, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me. So, but I'd go to SIDS deaths that were not criminal, but I would have to go to make sure that there wasn't any suspicion of foul play. And I would be around the parents that just unexpectedly lost a child to, a crib death. I mean, how hideous is that? I'd go to shaken babies. We had more shaken babies that these kids are now victimized and are going to have permanent brain damage the rest of their life. If they weren't killed outright, they'll be permanently handicapped with brain for the rest of their life because they had an idiot father who really this huge amount of time, they were the teenage gangbanger father that knocked somebody up. The mom, is trying to do right. She's trying to go out and be responsible. She's got a part-time job, and 3 or 4 days a week, she gets the father to come off the street and watch the baby while she can try and go make enough money to get formula. And this guy can't handle, because he has no mental capacity to handle a child that's screaming and you can't make him stop.
Yeah.
So many times saw that scenario and
Wow.
would shake it to try and get it to stop screaming. And then it would stop screaming, but then he'd realize something's wrong. I mean, just, oh, beyond hideous. I would have to go sometimes to, you know, to the morgue when they shot, you know, not always a baby, but I mean, I remember one time, you know, going to a hospital in the makeshift, you know, the morgue they had in the hospital, where I want to say it was just like about a 10-year-old girl had brought into the hospital. She died. We didn't know what the cause of death was. And my sergeant sent me over there to basically do an examination of the body to see if there are any signs of trauma, any signs of foul play. And so here's this 10-year-old girl laying on a stainless steel slab, naked.
Jeez. Oh my gosh.
And I'm having to, you know, look over every, you know, square inch of her body to see if there's anything. And she was the most beautiful little girl I've ever seen in my life. She was just this perfect, and, you know, I just was just taken by her beauty. And when I finished and I got my car, I had about I don't know, 5-mile drive to get back downtown to get to headquarters.
Mhm.
And I just wept uncontrollably the whole drive down the freeway. I just was bawling like a baby because it was just so sad.
Yeah.
And this may have been not a criminal thing. It just may have been some kind of natural cause, you know, but it was just so sad. And
So
that,
everything you're
that
looking
over and
at
over
is
again.
sad.
Yeah, it's just hard.
And whether it's criminal or not, you're there to pay close attention to details that nobody would want to pay attention to,
No,
criminal or not.
yeah,
And the criminality, even if criminality is present, doesn't really feel great to be there after that to now process this person into the criminal
yeah.
justice system.
And you know, and I know looking back that I would come home by the time I was in the child abuse unit, Melissa and I were just newlyweds. We had started dating and we got married.
Wow.
I remember intentionally going home and not telling her things because they were so horrible. And I think men will try in these kind of situations, will try and protect our wives by not sharing. And by doing that, we're trying to do the right thing to protect our wives. We don't want them to worry about us. We don't want to tell them about the crazy pursuit that I got into and thought I was going to die, or, you know, we don't share that with them. But by not having a relationship and where you share, you're not being able to get it out. You wind up internalizing it all, and
Yeah.
it stays inside you. And over time, it just begins to fester. You need an outlet.
Well, who are you going to tell
need
otherwise?
to learn that you need to be able to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't do a good job, especially with the men out there in professions like military, like law enforcement, that have to be the protectors, who need to be the tough guy in the tough situations. We don't do a good job of telling them, you need to be the guy that can cry when it's all over and can share how it scared the holy crap out of you, or how this dead girl,
yes,
even though you don't have a daughter yet, just broke your heart. You got to be able to talk about these things.
You're doing some ministry with men now.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to say something about that?
I started, my wife's got this thriving work that she does with women and leadership development and,
cool.
You know, just all kinds of things. She's got a whole, you know, built out leadership team, does courses and coursework. And she and I have done some training together, not necessarily for women, but business and ministry kind of combinations. But as she began developing out this women's ministry, I kind of went, all right, I should probably do the same for guys, right? I should make a men's group. So I did. It's about a year ago. It's not built, it's not big, it's not built out, it's not fancy, but it's just a group of guys that are getting together and just going on a journey, trying to identify and confirm God's original design intent for men and how that is to be appropriately expressed in their masculinity. In a time and season in this country where men and masculinity are either under furious attack from multiple sides, or the culture is trying to redefine them in ways that clearly are wackadoo. In a time where, I was just talking to a good friend of mine, a former law enforcement trainer up in the state of Washington. And in his opinion, the state of Washington has gone more liberal than California. It's like gone off the charts. And he says they are putting tampon dispensers in boys' restrooms in grade schools because they're being told that you boys can menstruate, you can have periods, you may feel, you may have an inner woman inside of you that really wants to come out, and oh my gosh, it's so anyway, in light of all of that, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but yeah,
no, it's not a tangent. It's
yeah,
exactly right. It's exactly right on topic.
yeah. So I got a little Facebook group, and I have another group of 4 guys that came together. There's 3 of us. Well, there's 4 of us total. So 3 in addition to me. We came together through social media we're all over the place. We're in every single time zone in North America. One of them is in Canada, one in Montana. I'm down in Texas, one in Michigan, I think. And we connected, and we just started getting together on Zoom initially. Then we started doing just daily recordings. We're sharing things on Voxer, just as a means to, whatever. And this thing has turned into like it's turned into a little disciple group, just 4 guys. And never in my life have I had as real, raw conversations with other men about real issues. Typically when men get together and they're drinking a beer, they're talking about sports, guns, or women. And
right.
And if they're not talking about one of those 3 subjects, they're not talking. And we're diving into Bible issues. We're diving into relationship. We're sharing our dirty laundry, and this is what I got going on with my wife right now. This is where we're an area where we're struggling. And one guy will come up and, man, I've been there. And I have found.
So there's a context of trust.
Yeah.
With the guys. How do you establish the trust?
If we could figure out that and,
yes.
and
you could franchise it, like
market that as a pill. Man,
you could franchise it like McDonald's and heal America.
Yeah. It happened.
Yeah, well, maybe there's not a formula.
First, there was a couple of Facebook groups that we were kind of we had a little bit of cross-pollination between a couple of Facebook groups, but then we just started doing a few conversations with just the 4 of us, and somebody said we need to do a Zoom. And so the 4 of us got together and did a Zoom connection. We recorded it, then edited it, and then uploaded it into, my Nation of Champions is the name of my Facebook group. So we uploaded it into NOC, and then it just went so well, and everybody loved it so much. We said we need to do another one. And as we did several of these, the trust began to develop. But I think what took it to the kind of the next level is when we got off the Zoom in discussions that we knew were going to get posted on social media, and we got into the Voxer group where we were having, okay, This is a private conversation between the four of us, and it doesn't leave the circle of this four. And we started having conversations in that format. And then
Are they written out
no,
conversations?
no,
Oh, okay.
these are just recordings, just for
Oh,
ease
okay.
of quick being able to blurt them out. But that, and then what it evolved into is we're talking back and forth, giving these recordings on Voxer every single day, and we're talking about deep, significant, hard issues, and we're just sharing life in a way that I've never seen men do before. And that we're going to
And this stuff is recorded.
how
Wow.
we can replicate this, how we can set up something to get
Yeah.
other guys. And I don't know how we're going to do it yet. I don't, because there's got to be the chemistry, there's got to be the
Right.
trust, else you're
That's
not
right.
going to go deep.
Well, yeah. And if it's recorded, that's a whole other level of what can you do with that recording. And
Right.
so you really have to trust these people. Geez.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool. David, there was one more question I had for you. Crap, what was it? Doggone it. Okay, Nation of Champions, that's your Facebook group.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I am done with my questions. Is there anything you wanted to add?
The only other thing that I got going on that I'm like, that all of this stuff is what really super excites me. However, I got to say, I am also very excited and intrigued that I got connected with some people that have shown me how to get involved in the gold and silver investment as a way to hedge against potential economic downturn that I think everybody in the world sees is already happening.
You're not in Bitcoin or whatever that is?
Yeah, diversify, get into some real money, not this fiat currency. The dollar hasn't been backed by gold since 70 something or other. And it's plummeting. Inflation is skyrocketing. The national debt is beyond my ability to even comprehend.
Where do you put your gold? Is it in those books behind
you? No, most of it when I'm in an organization and a company that has their own private vault.
Oh, okay.
So
How do you get to it? How do you make sure you can get to it if you want to sell it?
They've got a digital wallet that you can transact and transfer things right from that. You can have it shipped to you, but they can, if you're wanting to convert it to currency to sell or to purchase, you can do that digitally right through their wallet. But the other thing that's kind of, so there's a defensive strategy to gold and silver, turning some of your savings, transferring or rolling over some of your 401ks or IRAs to gold-backed 401ks where the money just won't disappear if the bottom falls out of the economy.
Right.
But there's an offensive strategy in an area that I've never thought I would get interested in, and that's collectible coins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just I would never have dreamed, I would never have seen that coming. And so got involved in that and just sharing people, just sharing that with people and helping them kind of make educated decisions about how to better protect the assets they already have.
Yeah. And there's a lot to learn on that stuff.
Yeah.
Go to any pawn shop and you'll figure out very quickly that it's interesting to see if you know more or less than the guy behind the counter on whatever you're looking at. I always feel like I know a lot less.
Yeah.
So I just sounded like Donald Trump. I always feel like I know a lot less than the other guy. But yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. Sounds kind of fun to get. So it sounds like you have to learn a lot.
Yeah, there is. There's a pretty steep learning curve. They've got a lot of educational material, and there's a lot of education. YouTube has become a place where you can
right
discover some real gems on YouTube.
Yeah.
And some
Well,
of the people,
some people are going to discover this gem right here, you on YouTube, because this is going up on YouTube, David.
yeah, we'll see.
David, I know what I was going to ask you. I found the question. What? Sorry, it was so long ago. You said you carried a gun. What kind of gun do you carry? You don't have to answer it if you don't want to,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, no. I've been through a lot over, so I'm 61. I'll be 62 this year. And I started at 25 when I got my first job in law enforcement. Prior to going into putting myself through the police academy,
Hmm.
I had never fired a handgun before in my life.
Really? No
Oh yeah.
kidding.
So
Did
I
you go
had
to
to,
college?
yeah,
Did you go to college? Oh, where'd you go to college?
Fresno State.
Fresno State. Did you play football there?
I
Did
played
you ever
against
play against a guy named
Gerald,
Gerald
Gerald
Wilhite?
Wilhite.
You did?
Gerald Wilhite. Yes. I saw your post where his daughter gave you
Yeah.
that thank you card and
Uh-huh.
then gave you a commemorative NFL card. This is when my dad played in football. I saw that post and I saw his name, Gerald Wilhite, and I went, I know that guy. I
Yeah.
played against that guy.
And so you
Tackled
remember
him
him.
number two.
That's funny.
Mostly, I just watched him run away from me because he was super good.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, he was a tailback for the Denver Broncos for about 6 or 7 years.
He was one of my favorite players when I was a little kid and he was easy to remember because he would do a backflip in the end zone if he got a touchdown.
Yep.
He must have got enough touchdowns where I saw quite a few of those backflips, and there's a YouTube channel where you can see a bunch of them where him
Yeah.
doing, yeah. But so I had these girls, these two black girls were they were twins, were in my Los Angeles Loyola Marymount class about 12 years ago, I guess now, something like that. And the last name Wilhite. So I
Mhm.
said, any relation to Gerald Wilhite? And I thought, yeah, they're just gonna, who's that? And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, he's our dad. I said, number 47 of the Denver Broncos. And they're like, yeah. And so, yeah, but, and then it wasn't even that same semester they gave me that. They forgot to give me that. But before they graduated, they tracked me down and make sure they gave me that card. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that is
Yeah, I
cool.
remember your comment on that. I was like, oh, wait, hold on. You
Yeah.
played football? That's cool.
Yeah. So, yeah,
But you
but
never shot a handgun, but you played
I,
football.
so, I had to buy a gun to go in the police academy because I was putting myself through as a non-sponsored cadet. So I just bought whatever, the police department and the sheriff's department were using as their duty gun. Back in those days, it was a Smith & Wesson 459 9mm. So I owned that for a while. When I got my first job in San Clemente PD is where I got my first job. I was there for like 2 years,
Really?
and they made me carry a 357 Magnum for a while. I hated it because I wasn't a wheel gun guy. I was a semi-auto guy. But shortly thereafter, they went to the first version of the Smith & Wesson 645. So a big, heavy 45 caliber semi-auto. I left to Fresno PD. We carried the same gun for a while. Then Fresno PD went to Beretta 40s. I wasn't a big fan of Beretta. They're a great gun. There's nothing wrong with the Berettas, the 92 series. It just wasn't personal preference.
Yeah.
Wasn't my ideal.
Do you have big hands? I'm just curious. You played
I
football.
have kind of medium hands, just
Oh,
medium.
okay. Yeah.
They're wide, but my fingers aren't long, which handgun wise now makes me rotate my grip position so I can get enough meat on the trigger,
Yeah.
to
Sure.
pull it in a controlled fashion. So I
Mhm.
really got to make up for that with my support hand placement so that the
Gotcha.
gun doesn't recoil in an odd
Yeah. Yeah.
configuration. Currently, I hated Glocks when they first came out. I boo-hooed them like crazy until I shot one for the first time, and I became an instant fan. Um, I still own a Glock. I have a SIG, let's see, 226, single action only. I'm a
Really?
big fan
Wow.
of 1911s, and but I don't own a 1911. But I love single action. I love the way the safety works. It's more intuitive to me. And my wife surprised me. This is one of the greatest presents she's ever given me in our whole marriage. She surprised me about 3 years ago on my birthday.
With a single action.
Yeah, and conspired with our oldest son on what's dad's favorite gun, and I had talked to him about, I was in love with this P226 in single action only, and he had gone to the
Never heard
range
of it
one
in
day when
single
I
action
wasn't
only.
with him, and I said, "You got it. They got one in the store, Dad." And I said, "You got to pick it up and ask him if you could dry fire it." And so he did. And I said, "Tell me if that wasn't sweet." And he goes, "Oh, it was amazing."
Was
So
this a
anyway,
9mm?
That's a 9, yeah.
And so does the safety on it, is it meant to be carried like a 1911, like cocked and locked?
Yes.
So the safety blocks the slide from, or what, how's the safety work?
It
Is it a thumb safety where you
Yes, thumb safety.
lift it up?
Oh, yeah. So,
But it's not a 1911?
It's not a 1911. They took what their regular 226, which is one of their like signature
Right.
guns.
Yeah.
Most famous for.
But that doesn't have a safety on it though. The
No, it
226.
doesn't. It has a slide release and an internal decock.
Right. Yeah, the
deal.
decocker. Yeah.
But they configured and put one on this that is meant to be carried cocked and locked with the same thumb safety up
Yeah.
for safe.
Yeah.
And you engage by bringing the thumb down and then pull the trigger, just like a 1911. Yeah.
But there's no grip safety on it though, the secondary safety.
Nope.
Oh, it's
Nope.
interesting. I'll take a look at that. It's obviously not on the California handgun roster, so we
No, it's
can't, it's
not.
too dangerous for us.
Yeah, it's too dangerous because I think their standard magazine capacity is probably in the 17 round range, 15 or 17.
Yeah.
I recently got a Shadow Systems. This is a new company that's out there. It's modeled after a Glock. Looks a lot like a Glock. It's a polymer gun, just similar to a Glock, but I've mounted a red dot on this because my eyes are kind of old, and it's really hard for me to get the front sight in focus.
Uh-huh.
Just because I was a sniper on the SWAT team, it's really important that I be able to hit little tiny targets, and I can't get over that mentality. Even though defensive shooting isn't about hitting targets, it's hitting rapidly. It's something more like this size. You can do that, you're going to win. You're going to be more likely to win a gunfight. But I can't get, and I know that in that kind of a scenario, that's the kind of downrange firing that I'm going to do. But I have to be able to, or else I won't like the gun, hit a very precise, I'm looking for like maximum marksmanship.
Right.
So because of my old eyes I can't focus on that front sight unless I lift my head up and look through the very bottom of my glasses that are corrected for that distance. And that's a terrible shooting position. It's not tactical, it's not. So I shot a red dot for the first time and absolutely fell in love with it.
Oh, cool.
So I've got a,
what is that? What's that rig run, you think? You don't have to say, obviously, but
the Shadow Systems
curious,
with the red dot, I got for about, it was 11 or 1200 with the sight.
Cool.
Yeah, I wish guns.
And that's a 9mm as well.
And that's a 9mm as well.
Okay, there's a wheel gun out there, guy. There's a wheel gun guy. He's going to kill me if I don't ask you what your 357 that you carried was. What was it? Because I like 357s.
Yeah, no, it was an amazing gun. It was a Smith & Wesson 686. So it was a 5-inch barrel stainless steel 357. It was a beautiful gun.
San Clemente now is contracts with the Orange County
Sheriffs. That's right.
Yeah. So they used to have a PD.
Yeah, they used to have PD in,
That's
I got
interesting.
hired in 85. I left to Fresno PD in 87, 88.
That sounds like right about when everybody was going to semi-autos. Does
Yes,
that sound about right? Okay.
precisely.
Okay. Did everybody pick the Berettas, or did some people go to 1911s, or how did that work? Or
I'm
SIGs?
sure
Actually, you said Smith and Wesson was the first one, right?
Smith and Wesson was the first semi-auto.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
the
Gotcha.
645. And that was a good gun. And I love the 45 caliber. I love that round. Um, but
Yeah.
and back in the 80s, when military submachine guns were all 9 millimeters, and that was the craze, the HK MP5s, and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. They tried doing 9 millimeters in handguns because you could get so many more rounds in one
Right.
magazine.
Right.
And but the ballistics of the 9 millimeter in the 80s was inferior, and they weren't stopping people very well. And everybody boo-hooed the 9 millimeter, but they, over the years, they kind of made some improvements in ballistics of that 9 millimeter round. And
Yeah.
I'm a big fan that it's not the size that's going to the size of the bullet, or the that
I'm
is
glad you
going,
add of the bullet to that.
yeah, not
Sorry
the
to get a
size
little
of the
male
bullet.
humor in there.
It's not the size of the bullet that's going to put somebody down. It's
Right.
your ability to hit what you're shooting at. It's shot placement. And the 9 millimeter is more than enough if you can place your rounds center mass quickly and effectively. It's more than enough to stop a threat.
What do you think about proposals to limit magazine capacity to 10 rounds?
I can't. It makes me want to puke on my shoes. I hate it. Um, it just it makes no sense to me.
What do you carry now? Do you carry the shadow systems now?
Yeah, I carry the shadow
Do
with.
you carry an extra mag?
I will carry an extra mag, and my extra mag is a 21 rounder. I'll carry a 15,
15 and then 20.
you know,
So
in
you
the
got
gun,
16 and then
and
20.
I got a 20 or 20. Yeah, I think it's 20. But I have the same thing for my SIG. If I carry an extra mag, and if I need an extra mag, I want as many rounds as I can get in that one mag.
Makes sense
Without,
to me.
I know you can do, Glock makes like 35 round magazines that you can stick in the bottom of the Glock, and you got a magazine sticking out a foot below it. I'm not into that. That's going to impede your ability to move and operate that gun. I'm
Does
not that crazy.
So on the magazine capacity thing, that people, for some reason, there's a certain mentality that just that makes them feel like they're doing so much to fight crime. To me, it's like a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. is over there trying to imagine all the scenarios in which you quote unquote need a defensive weapon. And in their mind, they're sitting in their office there in DC. They think, yeah, 11, you'll never need that. Only a criminal will need that. Where do they come up with this? Where do they come up with 11?
I don't know.
You
I
know,
don't.
I don't get it. Does that strike you as odd as it strikes me?
Yes, yes. Their arguments to me are nonsensical. Um, I just don't view the world through the same glasses that a lot of these people do, and
I
it
don't
just
either.
doesn't make sense.
I don't think the word need has any basis in any of these laws anyway, because how can you possibly tell me what my need is ahead of time? You only know what the need is after it happened. And then you're like, oh, it looks like, oh, I guess there you did need 11. I'm sorry for making you a criminal. Idiots. Anyway, well, David, we've been going for almost 2.5 hours, and
Woo!
we are
That was very fun.
so grateful for all your time and sharing all this stuff. And I hope that you don't have any bad dreams sharing the stuff that you mentioned about kids and about crime scenes and stuff. But we so appreciate you coming on and sharing your vast and rich experience with us, and also helping us feel like maybe we can be vulnerable with other men
Yeah.
and
You
get
know,
help
it
if
was
we need help.
fun. And I think that, yeah, sharing some of this stuff, you know, I wouldn't even call it hard. I think it's just necessary. I think it's necessary to even in the right setting to be okay talking about things that happened way back when. I think it's nothing but healthy. And if you find yourself sharing it and you're having a hard time dealing with sharing it, that is a clear sign that that there's something going on inside, that you need either some healing or some processing, because you're holding in some of that ick that you need to be able to just get out. If sharing it causes you stress, that's a good, I think, sign that you got some processing to do, and probably need some help doing that, because who knows how to do this all by yourself? None of us do. We don't. Who in the world could have come up with, the EMDR stuff and get the outcome that you get from the aftermath of EMDR? Who in the world could have done that just by, I'm just gonna think about it and kind of work it out on my own? No,
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
happened.
Right. How many tattoos do you have? Last question.
Um,
For
this
those
arm,
listening, only there's some people that are only listening, so they can't see you.
okay. So this arm, I have a sleeve, and I've got an eagle up here with a sword that relates to the passage in Isaiah about rise up on wings of eagles and run and not go really weary, walk and not
Right.
faint. I have two pillars coming down here that kind of represent the two pillars of the Jerusalem temple, the second temple period. I've got some stuff that match some tattoos of my wife that kind of represents the Rose of Sharon, which was another name for Jesus. And then half of that verse from Isaiah is here. This one I got is the shield with the cross, the Maltese cross from there's a Rick
Can you show
Joyner.
it? Can you show any part of it?
Oh,
Right there. Okay.
yeah, cross, and the
So
rose.
this is not like white supremacist stuff, just FYI.
No, this was a group of knights.
Some people think tattoo, police officer, oh, you're a white supremacist.
Yeah. We now, back when I was a cop, you couldn't have tattoos, so none of this was on me back then.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But there's a really cool story about these Knights of Malta during like a 300-year period during the Crusades, which was a hideous period of time in our history. But they defended this island in several fortresses with underground tunnels against hideous attacks, well outnumbered. And these knights, these are old-fashioned, like knights who lived by a code of chivalry that they took very serious. This group were the first people that kind of invented or started to create hospitals where people would go and they would be ministered to back to health. And part of this knight's job, not just learn how to duel and fight and sword play and arrows and all the tactical stuff of the day, but they were required to spend shifts as wards in hospitals, cleaning up bedpans and sweeping floors and mopping up blood. They were very service oriented, and it was just part of the persona. And it's a really cool story. And I went, yeah, I think that kind of speaks to what a guy is supposed to be. We are supposed to be protectors and providers, and there's that side of us, but we're also supposed to love. We're called to love like the guy that loved like no other. We're called to love like Jesus. Woo, how much do we get that wrong because we're pouring all our energy into how to be a better protector? you need the balance of both. And these guys, the Knights of Malta, kind of represented that. So that's what's going behind. And this one on this arm, that's a bow, and my
That's
wife
cool.
has an arrow on the
A
same
recurve
forearm.
bow.
So I have the
that's
bow,
cool.
she has the arrow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for, when do you ship out for your next thing?
2 days.
Okay,
My
so you got
travel day,
EMDR tomorrow.
on Thursday, I drive to Louisiana. I'll spend the night in New Orleans. They'll shuttle us down to
Do you take your gun with you on the rig?
No, they won't let you.
Really?
They won't let
They're
you.
worried that you're going to take it over and like hold up
Yeah,
oil.
they got some weird rules and prohibitions, and but it is what it is. So,
Is there any? Okay, cool.
yeah,
I've never talked to anybody that worked on an oil rig, so this is a first time for me. So that was cool. You know a lot about a lot of stuff. That's really cool. And you don't look a day over 60. No, I mean, you're aging.
My body feel like it.
You are aging well. You got a great smile, and you look like a very warm man. So I'm happy to know you. David McCrery is your name.
Yes, sir.
Is there a way that people could? Is there a way people could reach out to you if you by email or anything if they heard your story and they want to ask for help?
I can forward that to you. Is this something that you can
I can put it in the notes. Yeah, I can post it. Yeah,
yeah.
And in a written form. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll send you away, and maybe we can show them where the Facebook group is if people are interested in that.
I will post and link any of the stuff you want on YouTube so people can read it and click on it if they want to get a hold of you.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll text you with all of that when we're done. And
that sounds great. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, David, for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Lucas. It was my pleasure.